Okay, now I'm recording. So, as we will see, that these two realities, these two main realities, the soul, psyche, and the power of growth, are not two separate realities, but the power of growth is what, in a way, we could call a manifestation of the soul, of the psyche. Now, I'm giving you these terms quickly, just for you to have a sort of hierarchical scheme of the Plotinian system. Then we will have to go into depth to understand where Plotinus comes from in order to enunciate each of these principles of reality.
Hi. Well, I just want to reconfirm. You mentioned that the power of growth is an element of the soul, or is it a power of the soul?
Yeah. It's an element of the soul. It's a manifestation of the soul.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
All right. And the soul is approached in chapter 5 and 6. Then in chapter 7, okay, Plotinus touches what, after a lot of reflection, I realized is the central kernel of Plotinus's understanding of being, namely what in Greek is called the nous, and in English can be translated, or is usually translated, either as intellect or mind. Again, also in this case, for now, just be contented with the sheer term, and in the weeks to come, we're going to elucidate each of these terms within Plotinus's thought. Then there comes chapter 8, which is a recapitulation, mostly. And finally, the chapters from 9 to 11, which instead have to do with the highest peak of Plotinus's thought, namely the one. About the one, I won't say anything at all for now. It really must be the final crown of our discourse around Plotinus. But it is from the one, in a way, that we're going to start, even just as a first attempt to say something about Plotinus's thought. So after having given you the structure of the treatise, which, by the way, you can find in the document that I sent you 2 weeks ago, namely analysis of each thematic unit. After having given this to you, let's start with the treatise itself, okay? And what is it the first thing that we're to pay attention to? The title. The title of this treatise has not been given by Plotinus himself, but has been given by the editor of the Enneads as we know them. I told you that Plotinus didn't publish the Enneads himself. And strictly speaking, he didn't write them. The Enneads, as we have them, are the result of written recordings, so recordings done through writings, that were done as Plotinus was having lessons. So each time that Plotinus was giving a major lecture, his disciples, or maybe slaves who belonged to the owner of the house, transcribed what Plotinus was saying. It seems then that Plotinus would quickly, very, very quickly, revise what had been transcribed, but the real job of revision was carried by some of his disciples. Let's call them disciples. In reality, we are dealing with auditors, okay, on these lectures, friends and auditors. So what we would have been dealing with in the beginning was not a corpus thought of systematically as a corpus, but raw materials that emerged out of lectures. The one who systematized this, yes?
I didn't understand the word corpus.
Corpus means a body of works.
Is it the same spelling as the dead body, the corpse?
No, corpus is referred to an ensemble of works. Okay, an ensemble of works form a corpus. So you can have a poetical corpus, you can have a philosophical corpus, you can have a mathematical corpus, meaning an ensemble of literally a body. Corpus in Latin means body. A body of works that form an ensemble, okay? So the Enneads, as we have them, form a corpus. A corpus is usually characterized by some level of systematicity, meaning that it manifests itself as some sort of thought system. This thought system can either be the deliberate choice of whoever put together the corpus, hence of the author, or it can result out of the editorial work of someone who's not the author of the corpus itself, of what is said in the corpus, but is rather the author of the systematization of the corpus. The case of the Enneads is the latter. Plotinus did not systematize the corpus of his transcribed lectures. It was Porphyry who systematized it. And systematizing it, Porphyry, as I told you, I think in week 2 or week 1, I don't remember now, Porphyry chopped up some lectures in order to reach the number of total 54 treatises, which then is subdivided in 6 Enneads, so that each Ennead would comprise 9 treatises. Then Porphyry went on to give a title to each treatise. So the title that we have here is not the title that Plotinus gave. Okay, very good. So how are we then to understand this title, given the fact that Plotinus didn't give it? First of all, we must bear in mind what I told you in the beginning of this course, namely that this treatise that we're reading now was once part of a bigger treatise whose objective was an anti-Gnostic and anti-Christian polemics. This bigger treatise has been cut up by Porphyry into 4 parts, and this treatise that we are reading today is the first of these 4 parts cut up by Porphyry. Porphyry then went on to give this resulting treatise a title of its own. And this title sounds On Nature, the Act of Vision, and the One. Now, given the fact that this is mostly a work in progress, we can already correct On Nature. I encourage you to correct On Nature with On the Power of Growth. Okay, On the Power of Growth, the Act of Vision, and the One. Or even better, On the Power of Growth, On the Act of Vision, and On the One. By the way, let me see if I can share my screen with you. Actions, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for the thing to share my screen.
I think it's the green arrow. Like point
Green arrow. Ah, share screen. Yes, yes, yes. You're right. Desktop. Can you see what I'm sharing or no? What can you see now? Not yet.
Are you sharing already?
Yeah, I'm trying to share. What again?
Still can't see it.
Enter for, let's see if I do this. Can you see it now?
No.
Yes?
No.
Not
No,
really.
Nothing, eh?
Maybe you try to share if.
Wait a second.
Prof, do you want to describe to us what you see on your screen?
Well, I'm seeing the text that I sent you, the translation. Let's see, yeah.
Okay. Because normally when you click share screen, there should be some options to select which window you want to share.
Wait a second. No, it says that I have to restart everything in order for you to share it.
Is it like that?
Seems... Yes, yes, that thing.
Okay.
In any case, let's do this.
Okay. Okay, have you share with the thing?
Yeah.
It's shared now.
Okay. So where it says On Nature, you can already put instead On the Power of Growth. Instead of On Nature, put On the Power of Growth. So I'll go to my text so that I can follow. Okay. So the title says On the Power of Growth, On the Act of Vision, and On the One. The One, what is the One? Let's start from this last term. First of all, let's say that this title given by Porphyry refers to the three main things that, at least on the surface, appear in this treatise. But does this title help us grasp the hard nucleus of this treatise? I don't think so. It just shows to us that there is a connection between these things. So Porphyry gives us these three words: power of growth, act of vision, and one, and suggests to us that in this treatise, a connection between these three things is the theme of the treatise itself. So our work, reading this treatise, will have to be to understand what this connection is, right? So we have to look at these terms. As I told you in the beginning, the one will be the term we will reach by the end, and whose actual meaning will be able to elucidate at the end of a path that we have to go through. But we can already say some minimal things about the one. What is the one? The one, as I told you before, and mark my wording, the one is the peak, so the highest point reached by Plotinus' speculation. Why do I say mark my wording? Because I want you to be clear on one thing, namely that the one is not a thing. The one is not a being. The one is not a reality. If by reality we understand again a certain thing. The one is no thing. The one is nothing. Okay? That's the first thing that you must keep in mind. I understand that by putting things this way, I haven't clarified anything at all about the one. On the contrary, I have thrown you into further doubt and further difficulty. But that's okay, because everything is gonna become clearer as we go through the path. Okay. Let's go then to the other term, power of growth. The first two chapters of this treatise
Sorry,
are,
Prof.
yes,
I quote from you is you said power of growth is an element of the
yeah,
soul. So did you mean the soul is a combination of several elements? Did you refer to that?
well, we're gonna clarify this as we go. Don't be hasty, guys. I mean, you have to learn to go step by step. Unfortunately, let me say this because it's important that you understand the attitude you must get into in order to read a text like this, but in fact to read any serious text, be it the text of a great writer or of an artist, a poem or whatever. You are used, unfortunately, to rush definitions.
Okay.
But you must understand that definitions, if they're reached, first of all, are not the final conclusion. A definition is always a jumping pad into a redefining. Okay? A. B. If definitions are reached, they're reached through bearing the patience of a path. So if I tell you, yes, the power of growth is the lower part of the soul, and being the lower part of the soul is part of the soul, but is not the nucleus of the soul, and blah, 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 blah. I will be telling you all correct definitions that you can find in any systematized account of Plotinus' thought. But if you understood what Plotinus is saying and how Plotinus says what he's saying, and why he says what he's saying, and what is the underlying, let's call it, concrete ground for him to say what he says. No. You would just be able to repeat some kind of systematic organization of definitions, which don't mean anything though. So the labor, the toiling that we have to go through is precisely that of trying to go through the path that Plotinus himself followed in order to say what he says. And at that point, we'll be able to really see what kind of concrete thing he was trying to touch, and hence to adjudicate how much of that concrete thing he managed to express. Okay? So let's go back to the first term of the title, the power of growth. If you have read the previous translation, you've noticed that what I call power of growth, your translator calls nature. Why do I then use this compound, clumsy expression, namely power of growth? Why don't I use nature? Well, because the term nature is ambiguous. It's not ambiguous per se, but it is ambiguous in our usage of it. As we said a week ago, I think, if I remember correctly, when we say nature, we think mainly of two things: either one's innate characteristics, or whatever is out there. Whatever is out there and whatever is not man-made, we ascribe to nature. Then how do we think of whatever is out there and whatever is not man-made? Well, the modern man thinks of this, whatever is out there, mostly as the manifestation, the outer manifestation of inner physical laws, which in their turn are governed by mathematical proportions. Is that what an ancient thought when he said nature? No. The word nature is a Latin word which translates or attempts to translate the Greek word physis. The Greek word physis is the word that gives us in English words like physical, physics, physician, etc., etc. But what did the Greeks mean when they said physis? By the way, let me stay a second on the word meaning. When I say what did the Greeks mean when they said physis, the word mean wants to express the fact that each word used in a language indicates, means in the sense of indicating something. It points to something. Meaning wants to say pointing to. Okay? So when the Greeks pronounced the word physis, what did they point to? They pointed to something. What? Precisely. When we say nature, we point to what we just said, someone's character or whatever is out there, and this whatever is out there in its turn points for the modern man to physical laws, to laws of physics, hence mathematical proportions. Was it the same for the Greeks? No. When the Greeks said physis, they understood something else. In the beginning of Greek thought, and this I say just very quickly, in the beginning of Greek thought, so at the time of Parmenides of Heraclitus, physis meant the manifestivity of things, the fact that things are manifest, things manifest themselves, things are governed by a strength whereby they manifest themselves as this or that. In the unfolding of Greek thought, this understanding of physis remained there in a way. And the question became, what is the core of this manifestivity? For Plato, the core of this manifestivity is the idea, the ethos, as we said last week. So the ethos is physis, manifestivity, in the highest possible sense. Then still for the Greeks, nature, or rather physis, came to mean, in a more specific way, in a more restricted sense, also whatever is out there, in the sense of whatever out there grows, moves by itself. Any growth is a kind of movement. So whatever has, whatever shows to have in itself the power to move, to set itself in motion and to keep in motion, whatever does this manifests the fact that it is physis. So physis, as Aristotle says, is the power to move itself. And growth is one way in which this power manifests itself. In the treatise that we're dealing with, when Plotinus says physis in Greek, he has in mind, first and foremost, this meaning of the word physis, the power of growth. That power whereby certain things set themselves and keep themselves in motion. Certain things appear to be in constant motion. Is it clear? Is it clear to everybody?
So
Hello?
physis is that which sets into motion things.
Say again? Say it again.
So physics says the physis as the power of growth is that which sets things into motion.
Yeah, physis is whatever is in motion. Whatever is in motion depends on physis. So, to give you a practical example, my dog, right, or I myself, I grow, right? My nails grow, my hairs grow, my body changes in different ways, right? This thing that allows me to keep growing is physis. I, as a living thing, am physis. Okay?
Hi, Professor.
All right? So, when Plotinus uses the word physis, that's what he has in mind. Mostly. There are other occurrences in this treatise, and already in this chapter, in chapter 1, in which the word physis means instead manifestivity. And there are yet other occurrences in which the word physis means characteristic, peculiar trait. Also in this treatise, we'll find one. In chapter 3, we'll find one such, or chapter 4, I don't remember now, one such occurrence. All right. In any case, the important thing for you to keep in mind is that when Plotinus says physis, you don't have to think of nature the way we think of it. He has something different in mind, something in a way simpler. but something that in its simplicity, if we start thinking of, opens up already a first problem, which is the problem that Plotinus takes care of in the first 2 chapters, from 2 to 4. Namely, if the power of growth is that thing that sets in motion whatever we see being in motion, on what is this power founded? On what is this power grounded? Which, put in other words, is the question regarding the essence of motility, not mobility, motility, the being in motion. Plotinus, as we will see, develops this question, having as his directing point the notion of ethos. And the notion of ethos declined in parallel with the notion of life. So, as I say at the end of my introduction to Unit 2 to 4, one way in which we can understand what Plotinus is trying to grasp with this thought is to look at it as an attempt to understand the phenomenon of life. What is life? Life, Plotinus says in other passages of the Aeneid, in an indirect way, he says that life is a sort of making. For example, if you want to find such a passage, just go look for just go look at the document I sent you, Aeneid 4:4, and there you will find that Plotinus says verbatim, he puts verbatim on the same line and referring to the same subject, the verb live and the verb make. So if you go to
hi Prof. Sorry,
here.
I didn't hear one of the
Yes.
word clearly. Like you said, life is sort of is a sotomy.
Life is
Is a sotomy you mentioned?
I did not understand what you said.
Like
Life
you
is what?
say Plotinus is trying to understand what is life, and one of the things he mentioned is life is a sotomy.
Life is a sort of movement.
A sort of movement.
Oh, okay, sorry.
A sort of movement. And
Okay.
Plotinus understands this movement as making. Okay? So if you go to chapter 44 of Aeneid 4:4, which I asked you to read in the email I sent you, you find exactly that in the same line, Plotinus puts together the word life, the word work, and both of these words are under the verb to make. When he says, but it makes what it must make, that is to say, it makes its own life and its own work. So life for Plotinus is some kind of making. Is the result of some kind of making, or is the unfolding, not the result, is the unfolding of some kind of making. That's why I say that already if we reflect on what Plotinus says in the first two chapters, in the first unit of this treatise, so chapter 2 to 4, if we reflect on the way he uses the word physis, we realize that what he's attempting is an investigation of the phenomenon of life. Okay? And we will see how this unfolds. Now let's go to the third word that is present in this title, and which in the title appears to be the second. In Greek, the word theoria. Theoria, which I've translated with act of vision. Now, first, a few words about my translation. Normally, this word is translated with the word contemplation. And this is the case also for the translation that I gave you, the translation by Armstrong. But Armstrong is not the only one. If you go look at the Italian, French, Spanish translations of Plotinus, you find that the word used is exactly the same. In Italian, contemplazione, in French, contemplation, in Spanish, contemplación. In German, the word used is the equivalent of these words, which is a Latin word, namely Betrachtung. Betrachtung says exactly what contemplatio says in Latin. What does contemplatio say in Latin? Is the fixing of the gaze on a particular spot. That's what contemplatio, contemplation is. The fixing of the gaze on a particular spot. And it was what the priests who had to predict the will of the gods used to do. They looked at a portion of the sky fixedly and continuously in order to be able to see how many birds and from which direction would pass through the portion of the sky within a certain lapse of time. Based on that, then would they predict what the gods wanted them to do. That's what contemplatio was, okay? Is literally, even in the word itself, the cutting up of a certain portion of a totality in order to then fix your gaze on it. So is the separation of a portion from all the rest. Does the Greek word theoria say this? No. The Greek word theoria means exactly the opposite. The Greek word theoria refers to a very particular kind of seeing. The Greek language is a fantastic language in many ways. One of the ways in which it is fantastic is the fact that for certain key activities of the human being, it has different verbs, each of which describe a nuance according to which this activity can manifest itself. So the verb theoro, out of which comes the substantive theoria, and out of which comes also the word theatron, theater, describes a certain way in which one can see. And which way is that? Is a way whereby one embraces in his gaze or in her case, everything, is a whole embracing gaze. That's what Theoria is. As such, Theoria, Aristotle tells us, is proper only to the gods. Only the god is able of embracing the totality in his gaze. The human being is not fully capable of that, except for a few moments of bliss, moments in which the human being, as Aristotle says, athanatisi heafton, makes himself immortal. So the verb theoria, the word theoria, says exactly the opposite compared to contemplatio. Whereas contemplatio talks about the cutting up of a portion out of the totality, and hence the fixing of one's gaze on this portion, the word theoria says exactly the opposite. It says the ability, it talks about the ability of embracing everything into one's gaze. Now, the word itself, the word theoria, which, as I told you, is a substantive coming from the word, the verb theoro, theorin, infinitive, is a word that, as many other words that then became philosophical words, was in common usage among the Greeks. How did the Greeks use this word normally? Well, it was used, as I told you, to refer to the ability to embrace with your gaze an entire spectacle, an entire show, an entire phenomenon. So, for example, you would be said to go to theater, and at theater you theoris. That is to say, you embrace with your gaze the totality of the scene, right? It's like when you watch a movie. What is it that you do when you watch a movie? You embrace with your gaze the totality of the scene. It's not that you concentrate only on one actor, right? Otherwise, you don't understand what's going on, correct? Or the word will be used also to refer to a particular practice, which was the practice of the theoros. The theoros was someone who was sent officially by a city state, to go to one of the Panhellenic sites, so to Delphi, for example, to observe the unfolding of the religious ceremonies, to then be able to report back to the city state which sent him. And what is it that this guy was expected to do? He was expected to say how things were performed as they were performed. However, the word theoria was soon appropriated first by the emerging disciplines of mathematics and geometry. To refer to what? To refer to the concatenation of different mathematical geometrical operations. That's why we say today the theorem of Pythagoras. What is the theorem of Pythagoras? Think of it. Is the concatenation of mathematical geometrical formulas, correct? So the theorem of Pythagoras is an ensemble of formulas. Am I right or not? The more complex the theorem, the more formulas it is made out of. So the more difficult it is for the one who tries to grasp this theorem, because this someone has then to be able to grasp many formulas and to understand how these formulas are connected, right? So it was appropriated, this term, theoria, by the then emerging geometry and mathematics. And then it was used as a key term by Aristotle. And a key term to refer to what? To refer to what Aristotle saw as the key activity, mark this word, the key activity. So the key energia. The word activity here wants to translate a word that you're going to find in this treatise, and that is a key word of ancient thought and of modern thought as well, since Aristotle, the word energia. Energia, out of which energy comes, but energy has nothing to do with energia understood in its original meaning. Aristotle thought that theoria is the key activity of whom? Of the human being, when the human being lives at the level of the human, and of the divine, of the God. And what is this, in what does this key activity consist? It consists in the ability to live and operate in such a way as to embrace the totality. But this activity for Aristotle was proper only of, as I said, the human beings insofar as they lived at the level of the human, and of the gods. Where does Aristotle talk about this explicitly? He does so significantly in the last book of one of his most important works, namely the Nicomachean Ethics. I'll write it down for you so that you have it. Wait a second. Oh. In the last book, he talks about theoria. And this is that theoria is the culmination of all human activities. It's the highest activity. Now, in that book of Aristotle, many people have read an opposition between theoria, between this key activity of the human being, and praxis. Many have thought that Aristotle intended in the book to define a contraposition, an opposition between theoria on the one hand and praxis on the other. Is it so? I don't believe so. If you read the book carefully, Aristotle says that there is no opposition between theoria and praxis. He says instead that theoria is the highest form of praxis, and being the highest form of praxis is in itself a praxis which sets the standard and hence directs all other praxis. In fact, he goes on to say that the most noble praxis that a man can involve himself with after theoria is politics. But it is correct politics is correct, politics is carried out correctly, only when depending on a clear and fully working theoria. Okay? So in that book, Aristotle does two things. On the one hand, he gives us a certain definition of theoria. Theoria as the highest energia, the highest activity, or as we will say later on, the highest being at work of the human being. Thanks to which the human being is similar to the God. On the other hand, theoria as the crown of all other practices, of all other involvements of the human being, which, being the highest crown, directs them all. So what is Aristotle saying? He's saying that you can do whatever you involve yourself with correctly. So you can do any particular thing you involve yourself in correctly, only if you're able to be at work, to operate at the whole comprehensive level of that highest activity, which is theoria. Okay. Now, how to translate this word theoria? If we say contemplation, we already saw that we fall into a gross mistranslation, because the two words, even prima facie, say two different things. We can go even deeper and notice that the word contemplation in the Western tradition, that is to say, in the tradition determined linguistically by the Romans, in the Western tradition, this word has come to take a mostly religious meaning. It is used to talk about the life of hermits or monks or saints who fix their gaze upon God, for example, or upon realities that must be grasped through an act of faith. It has nothing in common with the notion, for example, of concatenation of mathematical formulas, or the notion of a vision whereby a totality is kept together as totality, right? It has nothing to do with it. So we're to avoid the word contemplation. Also because otherwise, if we use that word to talk either about what Plotinus is saying or about what Aristotle was already saying, we then fall into weird conceptual oppositions, such as contemplation versus action, contemplative versus active life, and so on and so forth, mystical versus rational, and blah, 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 which are all oppositions that are not present neither in Aristotle nor in Plotinus. Okay, so we have the problem which word to use. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I must admit to you that I haven't found a solution, neither in Italian. I can't think of any Italian or French word that would be able to say by itself what the word theoria says in Greek, nor have I been able to think of any such word in English. Okay. So I resorted to, for now, to this solution of saying act of vision. Why act of vision? Act, let's start from the word act. Act is the word with which usually by the Latin tradition and then by the vernacular languages, the Greek word energia is used, is translated, sorry. Energia, as I told you before, is a key word of philosophical thought since Aristotle. It's a word that Aristotle himself has coined. Literally, it means en ergo ine, to be at work. To be at work.
Sorry, Prof, could you repeat
What is
the word and maybe give us a spelling of the
energia?
word act? Yeah.
And I'll write it down in Greek and then in Latin characters, and then I'll translate it. Energia is one. In Latin characters is transliterated as and how is it translated? In medieval Latin, it has been translated with the word actus. Actus in the various vernacular languages has been translated with act. Italian atto, German act, etc. Okay. Now, here the Latin translation is interesting because we can already ask from the Latin translation, does the Latin translation actually capture what energia means? No, it doesn't. And I'll explain to you why in a moment. Energia is a word that in Greek per se does not exist. It's a word that Aristotle has coined. Before Aristotle, this word simply did not exist. It's a philosophical coinage. And what does it say? It's a compound. It's a compound of en, at, ergon, work, ine, be, to be at work. To be at work. So the translation is to be at work.
Yes, Prof.
Or yeah.
So what does to be at work means exactly?
Think of it. Try to think of it. Whatever is, Aristotle says that whatever is, for Aristotle, the definition of being, the ultimate definition of being for Aristotle is ousia. And the ultimate definition of ousia for Aristotle is energia. That is to say, whatever is at work. Now try to think, what can this mean? What can this be saying? What do you mean when you say that you are at work?
Does it also relate to the what that like the manifestation of physis? The work that means they are moving, then they are growing. So
yeah. Also physis. Physis is an area. Physis is an area. Physis is at work. Physis is a being at work. Now, what does being at work mean? If I say that I'm at work, what do I mean?
You are alive and able to produce, like able to move.
Okay. Whatever is at work produces, moves, keeps itself together. For example, when I sleep, am I at work?
Yes.
Yes. The fact that I keep myself together without apparently doing anything points to the fact that I'm at work somehow. But I'm not doing anything.
You are
So
sleeping,
being at work, what again?
but you are sleeping. You are not. You are doing something,
Yeah.
which means you are sleeping, right?
Well, it depends on what you call doing. If by doing you mean what the word act means, that is to say, do something in view of something, then you cannot say that you are sleeping because of something else. You are sleeping because you are sleeping. You are living because you are living.
Uh-huh.
It's not that you are living because of something else.
Yes.
Things live because they live.
Okay.
Whereas the notion of act brings with itself, if you listen to it carefully, the notion of doing something in view of something. In fact, the word act, okay, comes from the Latin verb ago, which means I push forth. So can you translate energia with act? Not really. Not really. Energia is simply being at work. There is no implication of a finalism external to the being at work itself. Whereas in the notion of act, there is the idea of a finalism, of an end, of a goal located outside of the act itself. I go to the for example, yes, let me finish this. I go to the supermarket to buy milk. So the goal of my going to the supermarket is external to it. Whereas I take a walk to take a walk. In both cases, I'm moving my feet. But I'm dealing with two different activities altogether.
Okay.
So being at work is that moving, is that activity which has its end in itself, which has its goal in itself. Whereas acting is that activity, is that moving that has its end outside. It moves towards something else and finds hence its justification in something else. Again, a very simple way to think of this is I walk to go buy milk. I walk to take a walk. The taking the walk is an activity that has its justification in itself, not outside.
Okay. Okay.
By the way, let me open a parenthesis just to make things a bit lighter. I've noticed that in modern metropolises, such as Singapore, for example, and in Singapore more than in other modern places, the possibility to take a walk is reduced almost to zero, and hence the notion of taking a walk for the sake of taking a walk might sound quite curious, quite alien. But in other places, for example, when I was in Athens, I spent hours just walking around. Was I doing nothing? No, I wasn't doing anything. I was doing something, but a something which found its accomplishment in itself.
Oh, okay.
When you
Interesting.
sleep, the accomplishment of the sleeping is in the sleeping itself. When you live, the accomplishment of living is in living itself. Then one must ask, what does it mean to live in an accomplished way, so that living comes to its accomplishment? That's a big question. That's a big, big question. Okay, so let's go back to Theoria. How to translate Theoria? Act of vision. I could have said more fittingly, the being at work that establishes itself as and through vision. But at that point, the thing becomes too long. But let me write down for you how I could have translated Theoria. The being at work, which has itself as vision.
Hi, Prof.
Yes.
I understand your point, but I'm just curious. So why do you use the word vision? Why not act of go, act of something else?
Yeah, why vision? Because in the word theoria, what speaks is seeing, is the action of seeing, is the activity of seeing. Theoria, theoro, in Greek means a particular kind of seeing. Now, Aristotle, still the great Aristotle, in still that the last book of the Nicomachean Ethics says at a certain point that there are certain activities, certain energie, so certain being at works, that have their accomplishment in themselves. And in fact, the true energie, all the true being at works, all have the accomplishment in themselves in the moment in which they happen. And he gives an example. Vision. Vision is such an energia. Vision is such a being at work that is accomplished the moment in which it happens. Think of it. When you see something, it's not that you are waiting for something else to happen for your vision to be perfect. You either see or you don't see. If you see, you see. And the moment in which you see, the being at work of vision is all there. So vision is at once this being at work that is immediately accomplished the moment in which it happens, and through which, and now this is the important point, and through which what is brought in the field of vision is held as something.
Oh,
You
can you
can
repeat
say
again?
that, yeah, vision, what is vision? If you think of it, as Aristotle says, what does Aristotle say about vision? That vision is that being is one kind of being at work in which the being at work is accomplished completely in every moment in which it happens. Vision is one such being at work. Another such being at work that Aristotle names is pleasure. When pleasure is real, is perfect, is accomplished in the moment in which it happens. When, for example, when you put in your mouth something extremely good, it's not that you're waiting for something else to complete that feeling of pleasure and give you the sensation that, okay, now this is accomplished. No, the moment you taste it, your pleasure is complete. Or when, well, when you lay in bed with the person that you love. I mean, sex is the greatest, probably one of the greatest pleasures that the human being can experience, right? In fact, why do we seek sex so much? Not because of biological reasons, like certain idiots think. We seek sex because of pleasure, not because of biological reasons. So when you lay in bed with someone that you love, in that moment, your pleasure is total, is accomplished. So pleasure is one such energia, which is accomplished in itself the moment it happens. Vision is another such energia, is accomplished the moment it happens. Now, if you think of it, what happens when you see something? First of all, when you see something, you either see or you don't see. It's not that you're seeing something awaits for something else to be accomplished, to reach completion. You either embrace something with your gaze or you don't. Point one. Point two, when you see something, what is it that you are doing? Because you are at work in a way. And what is it, in what does this being at work consist? In the fact that you embrace something in your field of vision, you behold it, and by beholding it, you give it a shape. It is in that moment that that thing emerges as a thing. That's what happens in vision. And is no chance that Aristotle and the Greek tradition even before him used a word, namely theoria, that refers to, the semantic field of vision, in order to speak of this activity whereby we are able to embrace and behold the totality.
Prof, I have a question.
Okay. Yes.
So like what happens if you know, some people see the same thing, but different people have different perceptions of it. Right. So because like I might see, like, say, the same thing as other people might see, but different people have different understandings or conceptions of what this thing might be.
Yeah, it means that as it is always the case, different people establish different relationships, and hence they actually see different things. They see different things. For the guy who lives in some kind of tribe, or I don't know what, and cats are food, when he sees a cat, he sees a stew. When I see a cat, I see a pet. So can we say that that's the same thing? No, it's not the same thing. And can we say that there is a thing before an act of vision has embraced it? No. If we go deep into what you're asking, we are already at a point in which we see something that I hope we will see throughout the unfolding of this course, and for sure at the end of it, namely that the emergence of things as things happens always within the hermeneutical circle, a circle in which the human being is always called in from moment one as the main interpreter. Okay, but we will see this as we go on. For now, let's go back to Theoria and the way I translated it. What is then Theoria? It's not contemplation. Theoria instead indicates that supreme being at work, whereby, according to Aristotle, the human being and the gods are able to operate according to their true and highest capabilities. Namely, they're able to embrace totality in all its connections. Now, and here comes the thing with which I will leave you for today. Plotinus opens up this treatise using Theoria, using the act of vision, as the first keyword. And he uses it in an openly paradoxical way, as he himself says. And in what does this paradox consist? In the fact that, as he underlines at the very beginning, he uses Theoria not in reference to the human being or to the beings that have logos, hence the gods, only, but in reference to anything that is insofar as it is. He says, everything that exists as a desiring tension towards the act of vision. So in a way, he's saying, I agree with Aristotle that Theoria is the highest being at work. I don't agree with him that this highest being at work is proper only to the human being and the gods. That is to say, that this highest being at work is proper only to those things that manifest in themselves logos. I submit that everything that is, insofar as it is one way or the other an act of vision. And the entire treatise will be spent to clarify this apparently paradoxical point. But of course, we stop here now, and this we will see next time. So next time, what I want you to do is to read carefully chapter 1, 2, and the other ones that I hope I'm going to be able to translate by tomorrow. So I hope that by tomorrow I'll be able to translate 3 and 4. So read carefully my translations, okay? When possible, paying attention to how my translation is different from that by Armstrong. Read the passage that I asked you to read from 4:4. Go check the email I sent you. You find the specification of the pages there. And based on what we said today, come up with questions. Okay, so next time, what we're gonna do, we're gonna structure the lecture this way next time. We're gonna read together chapter 1. Okay, then I'm gonna keep myself just to the first 40 minutes. I promise, 40, 45 minutes. I will even put an alarm. At minute 45, no matter what, I will stop, and I will leave the floor to you for questions regarding chapter 1, the other chapters that you will have read in the meanwhile, and what we said today. Okay? All right? Okay. So for the time being, I will upload this video on the YouTube page, and we'll see each other this Thursday at what time is it? At 10, right?
Yes.
At 10. Yes. All right. Bye, guys.
Okay, bye,
Professor.
Prof.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Prof.
Thank you. Bye.